Hey folks, Andy here, thanks for joining me. Right, yesterday morning I fired up YouTube for the first time in quite a while and got presented with a big long list of videos on the subject of how we're all using amp sims incorrectly. And it looks so what happened is that Jonathan Cordy made a video which kind of blew up on the internet, and it was based on some work done by a guy called Ed S. And the premise is that we tend to hit amp sims far too hot, and therefore we don't get the right sort of response, the correct response compared with the real amplifier that the sim is based on. And that seems kind of quite reasonable. I can see how that happens. It appears that Ed S went through the trouble of gathering data on a whole bunch of audio interfaces and how their instrument inputs respond, and on a whole bunch of different amp sim software and what sort of levels the sim is expecting to see to mimic correctly what the hardware is doing. He then put this all together into a spreadsheet, tabulated the whole thing out, and produced a fantastic resource that enables you to say, if I'm using this piece of kit and this piece of software, if I use these settings, then I should be in the right ballpark. Of course, what happens with YouTube then is someone does all that work, and then other people add their commentary on top of that. So the video that I watched was the one that Rhett Shull did, because I like Rhett's content. And yeah, all good, interesting stuff. But a thought occurred to me, and that is, this is all very well and good if your hardware and software happens to be on that spreadsheet. It's all very well and good as long as the spreadsheet is up to date, which of course it won't be for very long. And it's all well and good if you are setting up and doing your recording from scratch. But what if you're a mixer and you've been handed tracks, or you've got tracks that you've already recorded? What can you do about that? Or what if you're in the creative moment and you just want to get on and record? So I thought there is another sort of approach to doing this. Now, I came across this little approach, or I delved into it a few years ago when my mate Steve built this for me. And this is the best reamp box that you're never going to get your hands on. And of course, when you're reamping, you've got the same sort of issue. You're taking audio out of your computer and you're running it through the box into a real amplifier. You need to be hitting it the right sort of level. Now, I will say with a lot of these things that the notion of getting things roundabout right is very important. There's certain things like you do not ever want to be clipping the input on your audio interface. If you do, you can't recover that. But if you're leaving 6, 9, something like that dB of headroom above your loudest peaks on the way in, once you get past there, you can adjust the level at any point in the digital domain with the same effect. So you don't have to worry too much about getting this stuff done as the video I watched was suggesting right at the start. As long as you're not clipping on the way in, you can adjust this as you need to. The trouble is then, how do you know where to adjust it to? Now, this is all very rule of thumb, but the thing you've got to bear in mind is this. Your guitar has got pickups which have a tolerance in their manufacture. So if you put a similar pickup in two different guitars, you're probably going to get different outputs from it to some extent or other. It is incredibly hard to pin down what the output of an electric guitar actually is. I looked this up, and more on this one in a moment. Plus, whatever tube amp you are plugging into, I might have the same tube amp. I've got different input tubes in it, so it will respond differently. It's got different tolerances on the components. Old Marshalls are made with vastly differing components in them because, Marshall bought what was cheap back in the day. So there isn't a answer that is, this is the perfect setting. There is a range of pretty good through to really not very good. But as long as your 5150 isn't sounding like a twin, or your twin isn't sounding like a triple rectifier, you're probably somewhere nearby. So what can we do to balance this stuff out? Right. The approach that I took when I delved into this a while ago was to find out what kind of level I could put on a VU meter on the way in to my amp sim. And as long as I could get that roundabout right so that the sim was sounding kind of right, I was happy enough with that. Now, it's notoriously difficult, as I say, to get a grasp on what the output levels of electric guitars are. A lot of the time when you look this stuff up on the internet, what you find is that the information is quoted in terms of DC resistance of the coils, and that really doesn't tell you anything much at all. I found a table which listed out some kind of slightly obtuse pickups, and it was quoting 13 millivolt RMS through to 50 or 60 millivolt RMS levels for fairly weak pickups like some old lipstick pickups. I looked on the Damasio website and they are quoting maybe into the hundreds of millivolts, which I'm presuming is marketing speak. It's peak level because the big numbers are sort of better. But I stuck my Fret King across a multimeter and hit a low E chord, and I got 280 millivolts at peak, and then it kind of settled down. So I figured that between 150 and 200 millivolts is probably round about a reasonable level to be looking at for what we can see is that is an output from an electric guitar. And yes, some are going to be less, some are going to be more, but round about that gives us something to work on. So if we're happy enough to take 150 millivolts as a workable output level for a guitar, and yep, there is a huge range of values around this. 150 millivolts is roughly equivalent to minus 14 dBu. A pro calibrated system is going to give you 0 dBVU, equivalent to plus 4 dBu. That means that your instrument level is going to be showing as around about minus 18 dBVU. So stick a VU meter before your amp sim, and if you're in that, let's say minus 21 to minus 15 range, if the needle's bobbing about there, then you're probably pretty good to go for what most amp sims are going to be expecting to see most of the time. Let's have a look at that. Right, so what I've got here is a Cubase project. I've got a segment of a guitar track loop, and I have put a VU meter as the first thing on that track. And in the actual recording, I'm using Scuffer Mesky, which is probably around about my favorite amp sim. But I've actually fired up the Waves PRS Dallas sim on here simply because it's got an auto input function on it, which I thought would be a bit of fun to have a look at. So if I start this playing, what we're going to see is the VU meter is hobbling there around about minus 35, minus 25, and that's obviously a little bit on the low side. So if I increase the gain on the channel to bring that up to the point where it's hovering in that there, I'm going to say that's probably not too bad. We're in the minus 18, minus 15, except for the very sort of peak bits. Yeah, I'd say that's not too bad. That's got just over 11 dB of gain on it. So if I now come down to my amp sim, and if I click the auto input button, and that will adjust the input, and that's actually minus 0.1 dB. So that's the level, that's setting the level that the sim is expecting to see, and that's in that, as we talked about, minus 21, minus 15 sort of range of the dBu meter. And there you go, it really is kind of that simple. The whole point of this is that it's rule of thumb stuff. It's about getting in the ballpark, getting on and making music. Yes, the approach where you take the exact measurements is going to be more precise for saying whatever guitar you plug into it, this sim will act more like the real amp. But do bear in mind, the sim is not the amp. The input circuitry on your DI box or on the instrument input on your audio interface is not the input circuitry on your amp or on the buffered effects pedal that you're plugging into or whatever. If you are absolutely adamant that you need the precise sound of the real amp, then you need to plug into the real amp. Your sim may be based on a specific model which is slightly different to yours. There will be a sweet spot. We're going to be in the zone where the amp sounds about right, and then make that final tweak just by ear. It's the work of seconds, and it lets you get on with making music. Okay, I hope this is useful. If it is, please give us a thumbs up. That'd be fantastic. Hit the subscribe button. That would be even better. Hit the little bell so that you get notified of new content. If you've got any questions, stick them down below. I'm happy to see if I can answer them. I'm Andy Picker. I'll see you next time out. Until then, look after yourselves. Bye for now.